Okay, good morning. Oh, sorry, good afternoon, everybody. Um, this is a little bit strange. I wish I was there, but I'll try and make this work as best I can. So this talk is about something I've been interested in for quite a while. As you heard, I wear many hats, so maybe I don't get to spend so much time on each kind of area. But I've had two excellent MSc students who worked through with me this last year, and we've managed to do some work that kind of reinforces what I'd like to kind of do in terms of understanding what happens in fatal collision. So this is not a big brother approach. Okay, so a little bit of about Plymouth, if you've not already heard anything so far. So, hold on, let me. So there's just some images of the. You can see the on the top left. You can see the kind of the hub of student life, student union, and the library. Um, a beautiful view to the right of the historic Barbican, where Mayflower set sail to the USA before it was the USA. It's a wonderful shot of the natural harbour of Plymouth, and then finally you can see kind of like the main kind of thoroughfare that the people in the city will see as they walk past the campus. Okay, so this is so what are we going to talk about? Well, basically, this kind of the motivation has been around the idea of kind of like the kind of flight data recorder for an aircraft, i.e., something which only is examined when there is a crash. So it's not a kind of thing that people can actually engage with themselves. Um, so we look at some of the things that have gone on in this area, including, for example, event data recorders, accident data recorders, then some of the kind of simple scenarios that again cause difficulty in kind of understanding what happens. Often it's down to somebody saying he didn't have his indicator on, or he didn't have his brakes on, or something like that. But as crashes get a little bit more complicated and the outcomes more difficult to understand, then we have something called car crash forensics, and this is still very much in evidence.
Jenkins,
Can you hear me?
Jenkins, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, can we have one slide? The presentation mode, please. We see multiple slides.
You can see multiple slides. How is that?
Yeah. Full,
Is that full screen?
no, not yet.
Hold on, let me. How is that? Is that better?
The brightness has increased, but not a full screen.
Not full screen.
We are seeing multiple slides.
Ah, I'll just try to. All I've been doing is swapping. How about that? Do you not just see one? Let me try this one. How was that?
Okay.
Is that good?
Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is what we wanted. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Great. Okay. We just have to go. Okay. So back to where we were. Okay. So often when there is a collision, some of the things that that the police do, and we see it quite regularly in the UK on the TV. There's a fatal crash, and you will see the police are out with tape measures, torches, etc., and they're trying to understand what actually happened. And there's some things they can do in terms of forensics, but they still can't understand generally what happened. And if someone has been killed, then they can't even ask them. So we'll look at some of this kind of work, and then and then look at sort of some of the sensors that we can use to try and build up this kind of bigger picture But there's so many different sort of sensor sources, we need to kind of put them all together in kind of sensor fusion. And then it comes to where we're trying to go with this work, and we've made quite good progress, but we're moving on from what you can see online, where people are doing research in simulations, and we're interested in actual reconstructions. So we'll look at what we've done so far, and then show you where some of my other colleagues at Plymouth can help us go into the kind of forward direction with this, to actually enable a very good reconstruction to be made. And then finally, we will conclude. Okay, so the motivation was, for example, these kind of flight recorders, which you can see on the screen there. And as you know, they're very, very robust. They record a considerable amount of data. As we'll see, they also record what's going on in the cockpit. So I'm sure they probably hear something like "help" as the plane sort of hurtles down. But unfortunately, there are limitations into how these are activated and operated. For example, like no one seems to be able to find MH370 because it's now no longer able to transmit. And there's still concerns as how can we track everybody around the planet, but we can't track an enormous plane and know where it's actually gone to. So we'll have a look at some of the things that these can do in a short while. So this is the kind of box that we have. So it's a large orange, extremely robust, able to cope with the very high pressures of being on the bottom of an ocean, and the limitations are, though, when you're under the water, your communication is limited to say ultrasonics. So no longer can you use kind of any electromagnetic activity to alert you to where it is. So these are the kind of things that these are able to record, and these are the kind of things that I'm interested in terms of a car. So what we're interested in, for example, is situations where a single driver or just a single vehicle, the driver may have been drinking, may not. He's on a country lane. The first thing that's noticed is this car is now on the other side of the road. It's upside down. It's in a ditch, and nobody knows what happened. Sometimes it can be with two cars, and if it's a near fatal and there's people alive, no one will say it was our fault. They always come up with a different story, and so we're trying to eliminate this kind of response. And so we're interested in being able to essentially determine the orientation of the car in 3D as it moves along in time. So, and then as it sort of hits various objects, then we'll be able to determine essentially a 3D animation of the reconstruction of the event. And with this being fitted in sort of many cars, then when two cars collide or more, we can build up this kind of picture to understand what actually has actually occurred. And as you can see, these can withstand very, very extreme limits, as you can see in the right. So these are not quite the same in a car, but we still have to make sure that this box is robust and in the location that's least likely to be impacted. But as long as it can survive, then the impacts, then it's fine, because it's essentially the data is all processed afterwards. Okay, so why is this kind of so important? Well, for different the reasons are sometimes different. So as you can see in the UK, 25,000 people killed on our roads in 2016. So, and we're only just at the end of the year. In India, 500,000, 500,000 road accidents last year, with 146,000 deaths, 400 per day. And whilst there was 13 states in the picture as the big players, importantly for you guys, Tamil Nadu and Kerala are two of these 13 states. In the UK, the predominant reason for fatalities tends to be alcohol related, whereas in India it tends to be speed related. Okay, so so I'm not the first person who's looked at this, and there's quite a lot of research globally to try and understand sort of kind of what has happened. And so there's sort of three examples. Two of them are easy acronyms to say, Veronica and Samovar, but we'll have a little look at the one sort of the multiple wireless data acquisition system, a smart vehicle, which is a little bit difficult to say. But it has some problems when, for example, we get this kind of situation of multiple collisions. But this is the kind of event that we're looking to try and work out what actually happened, where for example, as I said, a car has something's happened, it hit an obstacle, it's bounced off. In this case, it's hit another car, but it's gone into a tree. Quite difficult to work out. So, so this is, so when we look at that system here, you can see it's a good start in terms of what is required in this particular area. So you can see this one has got to say this is all based on an ARM microcontroller, and there is some kind of limited kind of monitoring option. So you can see it's looking at fuel. So this is alcohol. Looking at some of the engine conditions, and then we've got, for example, simple things like, are the doors open? What was the engine speed? But very, very limited information in terms of what it would be nice to actually achieve. And another thing that's become quite a big thing in the UK, and I think this will roll out globally. It's certainly something within the EU that is becoming mandatory for new cars to have the technology with this capability. And so for many younger people, the idea of being able to, for example, put their mobile phone on the dashboard of a car and run an app which essentially monitors how you drive. So it doesn't tell us like kind of all the information, but it certainly it has a useful role in reducing accidents, which is primary what we really need. We don't really want as many accidents as we have today. So so you can see the things that people are limited to are, for example, you can't speed. So this could be a good one for India. Not sure how you'll implement it just yet, but it's a useful one. Driving at night. Now, driving at night in India is one of the most scary experiences I've experienced, where two people coming the opposite way decide the best thing to do is dazzle each other with full beam. I'm sure we can come up with some technology to eliminate that. But in the UK and in Europe, then this is often where people have had some beer or so. And so it's a kind of another sort of thing that can be done. Now this is a kind of an opt-in. So you can contact your insurance company and you can have this technology just using the sensors in your phone. Okay, but the EU has taken it a step further, and this is kind of more like Big Brother. So and if you're like me, I don't like the Big Brother approach, but this is particularly so in this case. For example, again, this is very much driven by insurance and sort of EU regulations. But for example, you can see here we have this example that if you ask people about their driving behaviour, like most people, they like to err on the side of caution and say, no, I'm a very good driver. I stick to the speed limits. But actually, we're probably all guilty of driving a little bit too fast. And so this kind of technology will be sort of standard fitment in new cars. And unlike what we can see there, this will be something which you can't really disturb. And I'm sure there will be mechanisms in place that, for example, would disable the car should you decide to so take some wire cutters and cut the connections. So obviously that's not very good. Okay, so this is not a new problem either. So here you can see 3 cars here. Now, I think if these could break the speed limit, they would be quite happy, because I don't think these went so fast, or maybe wrong. But still, so this looks like a typical example here where someone hasn't looked what's happened. Soon many other people are drawn into the accident, and the situation that you can see there is the result. So these kind of collisions are quite common. And so when we look at kind of like a simple sort of situation here. So this is this driver you can see on the right. He's just left Chennai on his en route to London, and this is quite typical of what happens in many cases. I'm quite pleased to say I've not had any of these collisions, but we do see many of them here. So we're interested in not only, for example, the questions like, was the driver driving too quickly, or did he have? Sometimes a driver will have the wrong indicator on, or they leave the indicator on when they're going straight ahead. But there are also, as we'll see, there are other situations where the person that causes the accident is not aware of any of these situations. We'll see why that could be. And so here's a kind of, and so these are kind of real pictures here from an accident in the UK, where you can see exactly kind of what we talked about. 2 cars in a little bit of a bad state. And then we can see some of the other questions that come up, especially when we look at kind of like crash forensics, and kind of trying to work out what actually happened. So, for example, this is a daylight situation, so we wouldn't necessarily expect vehicles to have headlights on. But according to the illumination, so sometimes in the daytime it can be quite dark, or once we come into the night time, obviously it's dark, and we're kind of trying to know, were the headlights on, were the indicators on, did the brake lights come on, and were the brakes applied? So we'll see how some of the crash forensics can help us understand the answers to these questions. But technology is actually creating more problems, in the sense that some of this technology will not work in newer vehicles, as we shall see. But this coming back to the kind of situation that I'm kind of motivated by is, for example, this situation here. You can see again, this is an actual accident in the UK in June of last year. And this road was closed for several hours, and you can see, like, the police officer is there. He's looking at what's happened, and then they try to do things like measure lengths of skid marks. When vehicles go across the, say, grass, for example, then they can tell by the resultant change of the surface whether the wheels were rotating or the brakes are locked. But it's still very much a kind of hands-on situation that's quite complex, and it's obviously it's very much down to user expertise and experience into how well this can be achieved. And so this is again, so this is here, a fatal collision here. And now you can see this is the kind of situation that we're looking at. So, car crash forensics. What can we do? So there's apart from the things we've said, we can look at, for example, where the car is, skid marks, and changes to, say, surfaces. We're also interested in, for example, what can we do to understand what happened in terms of car lighting, for example, were things in place. Now so there is more and more data available, as I said, with the introduction of these kind of black boxes. But many cars are of an age that do not have them. And when they first started to appear in production, then if you had a basic model, then you really had a basic model. And the top of the range cars often came with, for example, GPS, sat nav, and there'll be more sensors in every part of the car. Okay, so for example, one of the things that they can do at present, for example, is taking account of most cars today tend to use halogen headlamp bulbs. So you have the sort of you have this gas-filled glass device with a tungsten filament, and then by examining the filament after a collision, then we can work out, as for example, whether the bulb was energized or not at the time of collision, and the results can also depend. For example, if the bulb breaks, then we'll see if it's on, we'll see the oxidation. Okay, so we can also say obtain information, for example, for the case where the impact happens where the filament is cold and brittle, and again we can sort of understand from forensics what happens. But what happens about the new bulbs, which are now becoming increasingly commonplace in newer vehicles? So recently we had sort of like the HID xenon bulbs. Whilst there are metallic elements inside, they're essentially a discharge lamp. But when we come to the new light bulbs, like the LED type, then we really have a situation where everything is completely different. There's no glass case. We just have essentially two small circuit boards with a number of LEDs mounted onto them. So how can we kind of sort of engineer a solution to around this? So the idea here is to incorporate sort of, sensors based around fiber optics, where we can actually monitor all bulbs on the car continuously, we'll see that continuously is a word that we have to consider carefully later. But in terms of monitoring, say vehicle brake lights, fog lights, headlights, side lights, then we can do this on a continual basis. So we need to add in. We saw there were some sensors on board in one of those early examples, but we want to try and make use of those which are there in newer models, and also to add further sensors to build up a bigger picture. Now, if you're familiar with driverless cars, which are certainly becoming a big thing these days, then the earlier ones looked a little bit like this, and certainly we don't wish your car to look anything like that. We're interested in a vehicle which is essentially where all the technology is completely transparent, and the user has no interaction with or intentional interaction with anything that actually goes on during the process. And of course, he cannot even access any of the data, as we shall see. So what kind of sensors can we sort of use? Now, the first part is the more sort of traditional areas that we're familiar with. But there's a much more to it than just saying, oh yes, my car has GPS, accelerometers, gyroscopes, and a magnetometer for a compass. In order to try, well, in a car, you can't have very expensive sensors. The idea is kind of high performance yet low cost, and suitable to be employed in cars throughout the world. So, one of the simplest scenarios is just based around, for example, a GPS and an accelerometer. So whilst this is not sort of like sort of collision sort of forensics, it's certainly something you should be able to use. And for example, if your accelerometer experiences a significant change, such that would set off a car airbag, for example, then your location can be then transmitted to an emergency services, or maybe as well to a specified contact. So this is a simple thing that's easy to do, and it's in place in some vehicles already. But so the idea is not to have aerospace technology, but to kind of work within the kind of concepts that exist in aerospace. So here you can see an kind of example of what we're kind of referring to here. So we need to have accelerometers that work within a sensible range. I don't think we're going to need to go to 96G even for a head-on collision at high speed. So, but we do need to have sort of a wide dynamic range. And as you can see, here's two examples of what can be available. So, so kind of sort of very high performance accelerometers. This is actually, we're actually proud to say that this is a Plymouth-based company. It's a kind of part of UTC Aerospace, but these are actually made in Japan because of they're using their capability for making PZT films to make these devices work. But they're £150, $175. Whereas sort of what we're trying to work with is something closer to the bottom side here, where you've got to say basically under $2, and this is for a 3-axis accelerometer. Okay, but these are not without their problems. But as you can see, I've sort of highlighted analog because the idea behind this work is basically to design bespoke IMU, not to have something off the shelf, which is sometimes quite limited because it takes all the work away from you. All your choices have gone. So this particular device you can see here, this is a these are 3-axis analog accelerometer, and we can use this work. Sorry, we can use the output here to work out acceleration, velocity, position, as you know. But obviously, we have to be careful in how we manage the information that we have. And as you can see, we won't spend too long. There's a reasonable difference between what you can get in different kind of price ranges, but they still essentially do the same kind of job. But it becomes a little bit more complex when we go on to gyroscopes, for example. Now, if you fly in commercial aircraft, then you probably will be aware that the pilot is using autopilot for most of the journey, and for example, the kind of technology he would use is quite typically a ring laser gyro. As you can see there, this is one here produced by BAE Systems. There's no moving parts, and these are very, very high performance, and these are suitable for use in, say, commercial aircraft, military aircraft, navigational systems, and they have pretty exceptional properties. Now, they all work on even MEMS and gyroscopes and the sort of optical gyroscopes. They work on the same kind of principle of trying to detect the change in rate, but by a different technique. So the optical gyroscopes work by Sagnac effect, where you change the optical path length, which changes the which actually introduces an interferometric change, which can be measured. Whereas these measure the Coriolis force in a way which you can kind of see, for example, here. So this one here is, say, a piezo resistive gauge. We don't need to look at any of the kind of mathematics, but you can see what kind of happens here. We get these kind of uses strain gauges, and you can get a change in resistance as these move. But the problem with mechanical as opposed to the kind of optical gyroscopes is that if you just sit your gyroscope on your desk and record its output, then it pretends to have moved after a while. And this is some data that I got recently with some MSc students, and you can see that on the top right is the output from the 3 axes of this is a Fidget's IMU, and on the top left is essentially over the same time period where I've introduced some motion, and then actually when we integrate this, we can see, for example, in the upper right and the bottom left, we can see the drift that's appeared, the apparent movement with time, and then this has simply been removed by subtracting the stationary component, which is essentially working as a high-pass filter, but without any of the kind of dynamic limitations of trying to apply a filter to a variable frequency motion. And the reason we have to do this, as you can see, is, for example, you look at the optical gyroscope, for example, its kind of drift and random behavior is around 0.0035 degrees an hour, whereas with the MEMS device, for example, 70 degrees an hour for bias stability. So, we won't spend very long here, but so these are some kind of components which I've selected. So these are not cheap, but they're not expensive. So So here so this is, for example, high performance analog MEMS accelerometer. Remember, this is a unit price of 1,000, but in the big market, this will be much, much less. So this comes in at like $25, but this produces all three outputs in an analog form and a very low noise, low power, exactly what we need. And then for the gyroscopes, then I have so this is like a Z-axis for the yaw, and then below we have one for the pitch and roll. And again, these are each yielding analog outputs. Now, in order to make this as close to what's actually happening, then the idea is that each channel of the accelerometer and gyroscope has its own HD converter. So this means you'll get true simultaneous kind of real-time conversion, and we can also, again, for quite low cost, we can use 24-bit single-channel A to Ds, and we can put them in a kind of configuration such like this. So this shows here with the compass, and we can apply analog filtering as required, and then the idea is these are converted and transferred to high capacity SD cards. And the key thing is these are encrypted, so they can only be read by police or emergency services. As I said, two types of acquisition. So the continuous. So in an ideal world, if we can eliminate all of the artifacts of the sensors, then we can actually rely on the continuous data being useful. Alternatively, or in parallel, we can have something called event-triggered acquisition, which starts to try and anticipate. And this is where estimators are useful, to estimate a change and then trigger a local event data collection. So trying to move on quickly. I'm not sure how fast we go here. So, okay. So what other things are we going to go use? So some of these are actually in place. So that's why I said we got so like we would fit fiber optics to monitor all of the lights, seat belts, of course. Alcohol is an interesting one, but a most useful one. Tire pressures, voice recorders, door locks. What was the daytime light conditions or nighttime? With the wipers on, cameras to look forward to build up a picture, and then there's one here: driver asleep. We'll look at that one shortly too. So we look at alcohol and driver asleep. So drink driving, it's a problem in the UK for sure, especially at this time of year, but not really a problem in India. So the idea is, how do you do it so it's non-invasive? So one idea has been, for example, lots of cars now you start with a button, and so you then have a sensor that monitors your skin. Or there's this is probably more useful because it doesn't depend on passengers, but also to look at say these kind of other techniques, i.e. as a kind of like an airborne sniffer. And this is what we've used in our initial work, just to sort of see how easy it is to do. And so this is a project that one of our MM students did, and it's based around trying to work out whether the driver was asleep or not. And this is a common occurrence, too common in fact, and the idea here is using some sort of, obviously a lot of code involved. Again, for post acquisition, it's not a problem, but it can determine when the eyes are open rather than when they're closed, and then using simple kind of near infrared illumination filtering, then then this system works in the car at night time as well, and it had a very very high success rate at around 13 frames per second. So again, we can work out, for example, should the driver doze off, and I'm sure we've all been sleepy driving in our cars at night, and so this is the kind of system that we are. And so the two students, one has worked on the first part with the accelerometers and gyroscopes, and then Manda from India, he's worked on this kind of area of looking at incorporating a number of sensors here into say the second side of the system, and again we can store these continuously, and whereas the camera though will need to have its own storage because of the high capacity that can be generated. Again, we can do that on a continuous basis such that no data is ever lost. Obviously, very important. Okay, so that part is relatively simple. But the thing is, how can we kind of take this to the kind of level that we're looking for? So this is the kind of idea where we can combine all of the kind of sensors that we mentioned in order for us to determine, say, the 3D orientation, and then it's kind of and how that changes with time as the vehicle moves. So this is enhanced by, say, the vehicle speed, and also we can also use vehicle location tracking, although it's a slightly lower resolution than we would sort of like. Although military grade GPS is down to about 0.5 meter. Okay, so how are you going to achieve this? So there are sort of the two kind of techniques. So we've been using a complementary filter here. As you essentially could say, it's a much more user-friendly version of a Kalman filter. Kalman filter is very complex, but it is a very robust system with excellent prediction. But we'll see that there are developments in this area that we can use to actually develop a much better system. So the idea here is essentially to kind of to use the fact that we have a noisy accelerometer that doesn't essentially drift in the short term, and we can then combine part of that output with the integrated output from the gyroscope. So I know it's never a good idea to put any equations in, so I just wrote there some equations. Essentially, this is a kind of the approach that you can take, and you can see that we're kind of mainly concerned here with the value of beta, and you can see essentially this is very much dominated by the output from the gyroscope. And we'll see kind of how this kind of works. And so this is some work that was done in Plymouth here, and the idea, for example, is to make sure that after a given amount of time, for example, what we want is all three of those boxes you can see to be in the same orientation. And as you can see, that the green one is close to the blue one. The blue one is how it should be, whereas the yellow one, just on the gyroscope data, is somewhat out from what we would require. So now we have if we can get this to play. So this is sort of a little video to show you, and you can see the jitter of the accelerometer, and hopefully when it kind of stops, you'll see that the green and the blue are fairly close, whereas the yellow one is not quite there. Okay. So this is what people have been doing. So this is a simulation. Now, what we would like to do is to combine the kind of ideas that we just saw with this kind of situation. This is produced by a company in the USA. There's a lot going on here, including this poor man. So we could quite likely have a fatal kind of collision. So the idea is to be able to make a video like that, but actually using data so that it becomes a reconstruction rather than a simulation. So this is another short video. This shows, although there's no linear motion, it shows the orientation. This is a kind of thing that we're kind of working on. And obviously, in a case of a car crash, this will all be very, very fast, but the data acquisition systems are completely ideal for capturing all of this kind of data. Okay, so where do we go next? Well, we'll say we kind of we're going to kind of build these boards with bespoke. Going to make a bespoke IMU, but basically, what do we do with the actual data? And we see the complementary filter kind of works, but it doesn't work well enough. And so part of the work that in Plymouth, one of my colleagues, Sanjay Sharma, has been working. Is something Guido's very familiar with, the Springer, which is, as I say, this autonomous vehicle, and some of the work. So they've moved on from Kalman filters to the non-linear extended Kalman filter. But some of the work that's been more recent has been on these interval Kalman filters. This is something I was the internal PhD examiner for, and again, it's still not perfect, but it's certainly something that I need to start liaising with some of my colleagues to try and develop this kind of system so that we can actually have a kind of robust analysis of data. Okay, so just to kind of some of that kind of, so what can we say that we've done? Okay, we can say so a lot of work in this area, but we know more and more of these accidents will happen. There's more cars on the road, and I'm pretty sure over the next couple of weeks, as I watch the TV, I will see more traditional police methods. This time last year, there was a car drove into a Costa Coffee, killed a lady inside, and again, the police were there with their traditional crash forensics to try and understand it. So there's going to be more technology available. As I said, there's but much of that is the kind of big brother approach, and essentially, I want a non-big brother approach. So it's only for the police and say totally encrypted. But so I leave you one question: Will driverless cars be the long-term answer? For example, in an ideal world, each car you could remove all of that traffic congestion in, for example, in Chennai, because vehicles could all move much faster, but very close together. Which at the minute they move very close together, but very slowly. And so this time of the year, I leave you with this final Happy Christmas and thank you.
Marcel, you're open for question.
Please come forward. So you see northwest from here.
Oh,
Hello.
hello, Dr. Jenkins. This is Sanjay. Uh, I've got a couple of questions. So this technology, whatever you've been explaining about, is in between the regular cards with minimal, computing units inside, and the advanced self-driving cards. So is there any way we can actually backtrack those advanced technologies towards whatever is the requirement for detecting the fatalities? And, I mean, recording the data in these cards. So because all those algorithms are already implemented or like they're highly advanced, the only thing is to reduce cost of those.
Not sure if I quite heard that. There was some audio. So I didn't quite hear about
Sorry.
backtracking or.
Sorry.
This is where
Okay.
the technology is failing. You can type the question.
Okay. Okay, I can repeat the question. So, the technology which is being presented now is in between the regular cars with less computing power and advanced self-driving cars we are seeing now in the market. I mean, they're coming down the form of Tesla, at least. So, is there any way we can actually borrow those technologies from self-driving cars, reduce the cost of it, and make it more compatible for what is the requirement, the technology presented here? Because those algorithms and the sensor integration techniques are highly advanced and more always compared to fine from the other end.
I wish I could say I could hear that question, but were you talking about can we backtrack? Is this technology like retrofittable? Is it something like that?
Yes, yes.
It could be because but maybe not in its entirety. So it's quite easy to retrofit a black box kind of system for the dynamic tracking of the vehicle, but maybe not so easy to incorporate some of the other sensors, for example, fiber optic monitoring. But we could certainly have a bespoke device that can be fitted inside a car to produce the actual data to enable us to reconstruct what happened. Absolutely no problem.
I'll be typing the next question on the screen so that it's easy. I'm going ahead and typing the questions for you.
All gone quiet.
I press the send button already. Are you getting my messages on the screen? Are you getting my messages on the screen?
Hold on, let me. So next, how
it's on the chat box.
The laws for self-driving in the future? Now, this is an interesting. This is a big question there. this is going to be who is going to be accountable. Well, I wish I knew the answer for that. Is there an answer? But we certainly need to come up with something. But so far, there's the evidence has been that such collisions have not occurred so far. I know, for example, the Google car. It's been responsible for, I think, for one accident, and the other accidents have all been where it's been hit from behind or on the side, where it couldn't avoid the collision. What we can't have a situation is where, at the minute, for example, people can make their own. And the minute you can make a car, you can put it on you can get it past such that you're allowed to license it and drive it on the road. We need to have a kind of robust system, for example, where the technology is very sort of mutually employed. We need to have, like I say, a certain sort of common objectives and implementation. So it needs to be managed very well. We're a long way from that at the minute. Even where driverless taxis are concerned in some countries, they have a driver. And so at the minute, there's still no confidence to have a system where you essentially speak into your phone, car to Delhi, and it just drives, one pulls up, you get in, and it takes you to Delhi. We're a long way away from a whole system that looks more like a cartoon, where just all these little vehicles move around with no human input. But that's a long way off. At the minute, I'm just trying to deal with a situation that at the minute doesn't seem to be well managed, including the capability we have today.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you.
There's another question on the screen, user.
Using car forensics. Well, this depends what you find from the outcome. For example, so for example, you may find with an older vehicle, for example, that one problem may be that the brakes locked, and so you can see how the technology that's available now for many years has enabled us to eliminate that particular situation. So cars with ABS, for example, have probably resulted from this kind of activity where a situation once the brakes lock, then you've got no control over the vehicle. And again, it's kind of like what may you learn from the forensics. Depends what you find out. But if we don't learn, then we won't move forward.
Another question? Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for the very informative and thank you, Doc. We appreciate you being with us despite all the times of difficulties.
Okay, yes.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Hey, thank you, and I hope to come to Sastra soon in the new year, maybe in March. I'm working on that.
You're welcome anytime, sir.
So enjoy the rest of the conference. Okay, thank you. And hello, Guido. Hope he's looking. Hope he's
Thank
enjoying
you.
himself. Okay. Okay, are we done? Okay, bye. Bye. Now, hopefully, this is all recorded. We shall see. Okay, over to the next speaker. Right. Right, I'm gone. Well, enjoy the. Okay, bye. Oh, gone. Oh, right, okay. How did I?